Long before satellites and seismographs, ancient civilizations looked to the skies, the land, and even the behavior of animals to foresee the wrath of nature. What if I told you that these early societies, without a single piece of modern technology, could predict earthquakes, floods, and volcanic eruptions with startling accuracy? From the Mayans, who tracked celestial patterns, to the Greeks, who studied the whispers of the earth, these cultures developed methods so advanced that even today, scientists are still unraveling their secrets. In this video, we'll uncover how ancient wisdom not only saved lives but also shaped the way we understand natural disasters. Could their insights still hold the key to protecting our world today? Let's journey back in time to explore the ingenious ways ancient cultures predicted the unpredictable and what we can learn from them. For thousands of years, the night sky was more than just a canvas of sparkling light. It was a map, a guide, and even a warning system. Ancient cultures like the Mayans and the Chinese didn't just gaze at the stars in wonder. They studied them with precision, believing that the movements of planets and constellations held secrets about their world. The Mayans, for instance, were master astronomers. They built observatories and created detailed calendars that tracked celestial events with astonishing accuracy. They believed that planetary alignments, like the convergence of Venus and Mars, could herald natural disasters such as droughts or floods. These weren't random guesses. They were the result of generations of careful observation, passed down through oral traditions and carved into stone. Similarly, the Chinese developed an advanced understanding of the stars, using their knowledge to predict earthquakes. They created intricate star maps and observed unusual celestial phenomena, like sudden changes in the brightness of stars or the appearance of comets, which they believed were linked to seismic activity. Ancient texts like the Book of Changes even documented these connections, suggesting that the heavens and the earth were in constant dialogue. While modern science might not fully endorse these methods, it's hard to ignore the fact that these ancient systems were rooted in a deep awareness of patterns that could mean the difference between life and death. What's fascinating is how these cultures turned their celestial observations into practical tools for survival. By tracking the stars, they weren't just predicting disasters, they were preparing for them. They used their knowledge to time agricultural cycles, plan migrations, and even determine when to build or abandon settlements. The skies, in their view, were a living, breathing entity, and by understanding its rhythms, they could navigate the uncertainties of their world. This celestial wisdom wasn't just about survival, it was about harmony, a belief that humans were deeply connected to the cosmos. And as we'll see next, their connection to the natural world didn't stop at the stars. Animals, too, played a crucial role in their predictions, offering clues that were just as vital as the movements of the heavens. One of the most fascinating aspects of ancient disaster prediction lies in the way animals were seen as living warning systems. Across cultures, people noticed that creatures seemed to sense danger long before humans could. In ancient Greece, stories tell of rats and snakes abandoning cities just before earthquakes struck, behavior that wasn't just dismissed as coincidence but was carefully documented. Similarly, Chinese records describe fish leaping out of calm waters, a phenomenon later linked to seismic activity underground. These weren't isolated observations, they were part of a broader understanding that nature often spoke through its creatures. The Minoans of Crete took this idea even further. They didn't just watch for animal behavior, they designed their cities around it. Animal pens were strategically placed to act as early warning systems. If livestock suddenly became restless or fled their enclosures, it was seen as a sign to prepare for trouble. This wasn't superstition. It was a practical response rooted in careful observation and a deep respect for the natural world. What's striking is how these ancient cultures didn't just passively observe these patterns. They actively integrated them into their daily lives. animals weren't just seen as random parts of the environment, they were partners in survival. This connection between humans and the natural world offers a powerful reminder of how much we can learn when we pay attention to the subtle signals around us. But animals weren't the only messengers. Ancient cultures also turned their attention to the environment itself, looking for clues in the earth, sky, and water. From the way the wind shifted to the color of the clouds, every change was scrutinized for meaning. This wasn't just about survival, it was about understanding the rhythms of the world and finding ways to live in harmony with them. Ancient cultures didn't just live in their environments, they listened to them. They became experts at deciphering the subtle whispers of nature, turning observations into life-saving predictions. Take the Incas, for instance. High in the Andes, they closely monitored water levels in rivers and lakes, noticing patterns that signaled impending floods. They also studied cloud formations, understanding how shifts in the sky could foretell dramatic weather changes. These weren't just casual observations, they were meticulously recorded and passed down through generations, forming a living library of environmental knowledge. In Japan, villages developed their own methods of reading the earth. Long before modern seismographs, people noticed that wells would suddenly run dry before an earthquake. This wasn't mere coincidence, it was a sign that underground water was shifting, a precursor to the ground itself shaking. These early warning signs were woven into the fabric of daily life, becoming part of a community's shared wisdom. It's fascinating to think about how these ancient practices weren't just about survival, they were about connection. People were deeply attuned to their surroundings, seeing themselves as part of a larger, interconnected system. But this environmental awareness wasn't just practical, it was cultural. Stories, rituals, and traditions kept this knowledge alive, ensuring that each new generation could build on what came before. It's a reminder of how much we can learn from the past, not just about predicting disasters, but about living in harmony with the world around us. And as we'll see next, this connection to the environment often intertwined with something even deeper: the role of mythology and spirituality in understanding the forces of nature. In the realm of ancient cultures, mythology and spirituality were deeply intertwined with the natural world, especially when it came to explaining disasters. For the Greeks, the mighty Poseidon, god of the sea, was believed to shake the earth with his trident, causing earthquakes that could level cities. Across the ocean, the Aztecs saw floods as the wrath of Tlaloc, their rain deity, who demanded reverence and offerings to spare them from destruction. These weren't just tales passed down through generations, they were foundational beliefs that shaped entire societies. When disaster struck, it wasn't seen as a random event but as a direct message from the divine. To prevent or mitigate these catastrophic events, rituals became essential. The Aztecs, for example, conducted elaborate ceremonies, including sacrifices, to appease Tlaloc and ensure his favor. Similarly, the Greeks built temples and held festivals in honor of Poseidon, hoping to calm his temper. These practices weren't just acts of faith, they were practical responses born from a desire to control the uncontrollable. This spiritual framework gave ancient people a way to make sense of the chaos around them. It provided comfort, yes, but it also created a system for action. By attributing natural disasters to the will of the gods, they found a sense of order in an unpredictable world. And while modern science has given us a clearer understanding of these phenomena, it's fascinating to see how these ancient beliefs laid the groundwork for human resilience and adaptation. Now, let's shift our focus to another remarkable aspect of these cultures: their engineering. How did ancient societies use their understanding of natural disasters to build structures that could withstand or even work with the forces of nature? Ancient civilizations weren't just survivors of natural disasters, they were innovators, using their ingenuity to outsmart nature itself. Take the Romans, for example. When earthquakes threatened their cities, they didn't just rebuild, they rethought. They developed structures with flexible foundations, allowing buildings to sway rather than collapse during tremors. This wasn't just luck, it was a calculated response to the environment, a testament to their advanced understanding of engineering and geology. Then there's India, where stepwells were more than just beautiful architectural marvels. These intricate structures served a critical purpose during monsoon seasons, controlling water levels to prevent devastating floods. By creating reservoirs that could store excess water and release it gradually, ancient Indians demonstrated a profound awareness of their environment and the risks it posed. What's truly remarkable is how these solutions weren't just reactive but proactive. These civilizations weren't waiting for disaster to strike. They were preparing for it, anticipating the challenges of their landscapes and creating systems to mitigate them. Their ability to blend practicality with innovation was nothing short of extraordinary, and it's a legacy that still inspires modern engineering today. But how did this knowledge survive across generations? The answer lies in the stories passed down through oral traditions, a living library of wisdom that guided future builders and planners. This continuity of knowledge ensured that the lessons of the past weren't lost, but instead became the foundation for future innovation. Long before the written word, knowledge was carried on the breath of storytellers, passed from one generation to the next like a sacred torch. In the absence of books or blueprints, oral traditions became the lifeblood of survival, especially when it came to predicting natural disasters. Indigenous communities across the Americas, like the Maya and the Navajo, relied on the power of storytelling to encode crucial lessons about the natural world. These weren't just tales to entertain, they were survival guides woven with wisdom about flood patterns, earthquake precursors, and even the subtle shifts in animal behavior that signaled danger. Picture this, an elder sitting under the stars, recounting stories of past floods to a circle of wide-eyed children. Embedded within those narratives were practical instructions where to build homes to avoid floodwaters, which plants could signal rising groundwater, or when to move to higher ground. These stories weren't just told once, they were repeated, refined, and preserved with meticulous care. Over time, they became a living library, a repository of knowledge that helped communities thrive in harmony with their environment. But how did these oral traditions manage to survive for centuries without distortion? The answer lies in their structure. Many cultures used rhythmic patterns, songs, and even ceremonial performances to ensure accuracy. These techniques acted like memory aids, locking vital information into forms that were easier to recall and harder to forget. It's a fascinating testament to human ingenuity, how societies without written language developed such sophisticated systems to preserve life-saving knowledge. As we move forward, it's worth noting that these oral traditions weren't just about survival, they were also about connection. They bound communities together, creating a shared understanding of the world and humanity's place within it. This deep respect for the past, combined with a practical approach to the future, is something we can still learn from today. And as we shift our focus to the ways ancient cultures began documenting their observations, we'll see how these oral traditions laid the groundwork for even more advanced methods of disaster prediction. Ancient civilizations didn't just rely on oral traditions or fleeting observations, they documented their findings with remarkable precision. Take the Chinese, for example. Their earthquake logs are among the most detailed historical records we have. Stretching back thousands of years, these logs didn't just note the occurrence of tremors, they described the intensity, the aftershocks, and even the specific damage to buildings and landscapes. Imagine the dedication it took to compile such meticulous accounts, often linking seismic activity to changes in the environment, like unusual animal behavior or shifts in groundwater levels. These records weren't just about cataloging disasters, they were attempts to understand patterns, to predict when the earth might shake again. On the other side of the world, the Egyptians were equally observant, but their focus was on the Nile. The river was the lifeblood of their civilization, and its floods dictated the success or failure of their crops. By carefully documenting the height and timing of the Nile's annual floods, they could anticipate lean or abundant harvests. These records weren't just practical, they were sacred, often tied to their religious beliefs and rituals. Over time, they began to notice cycles, realizing that certain celestial events, like the rising of the star Sirius, coincided with the flooding. This blend of astronomy, agriculture, and spirituality shows how deeply intertwined their understanding of nature was with their daily lives. What makes these ancient records so fascinating is their dual purpose. They weren't just historical accounts, they were tools for survival. By studying the past, these cultures hoped to prepare for the future. And while their methods might seem rudimentary by today's standards, their commitment to observation and documentation laid the groundwork for modern disaster prediction. It's a reminder that even thousands of years ago, humans were driven by the same curiosity and determination to understand the world around them. As we move forward, we'll shift our focus to another intriguing aspect of ancient predictions, the role of dreams and visions. For many cultures, these weren't just random nighttime thoughts. They were messages from the divine, offering clues about impending disasters. How did they interpret these visions, and what can we learn from their beliefs? Let's find out. Dreams and visions held a profound place in the lives of ancient civilizations, serving as a bridge between the physical world and the unseen forces that governed it. For many cultures, dreams were far more than fleeting thoughts during sleep. They were sacred messages, often believed to carry warnings or prophecies from the divine. Take the Babylonians, for instance. In their society, dreams were meticulously recorded and analyzed, with skilled interpreters tasked with unraveling their hidden meanings. These interpreters played a crucial role in society, as they believed that dreams could reveal impending disasters, from floods to invasions. It wasn't just a matter of curiosity, it was a matter of survival. Similarly, among Native American tribes, shamans held a revered position as mediators between the spiritual and earthly realms. They often described receiving vivid dreams or visions that warned of natural disasters such as earthquakes or droughts. These warnings weren't taken lightly. Entire communities would act on the shaman's guidance, relocating or preparing for the challenges ahead. What's fascinating is how these practices, though rooted in spirituality, often aligned with practical outcomes. A dream about rising waters, for example, might prompt a tribe to move to higher ground, inadvertently saving them from a flood they couldn't yet see coming. While modern science might dismiss these methods as purely mystical, it's worth considering the role they played in fostering community cohesion and decision-making. Dreams and visions weren't just personal experiences, they were collective tools that shaped the actions of entire societies. And as we move forward, it's intriguing to see how ancient cultures didn't stop at dreams. They also turned their attention to the natural world around them, using observable phenomena to predict disasters with remarkable accuracy. From the movement of the stars to the behavior of animals, ancient societies developed a keen awareness of their environment, interpreting subtle signs that modern technology might overlook. These methods, though steeped in tradition, reveal a deep connection between humans and the natural world, a connection that, in many ways, we're still striving to understand today. Ancient cultures didn't just rely on intuition or superstition to predict natural disasters. They were astute observers of the world around them. They paid meticulous attention to subtle changes in their environment, from the behavior of animals to shifts in the earth and sky. For example, the Romans noticed that birds would fall eerily silent before a volcanic eruption, a phenomenon that modern science now links to the release of toxic gases. Similarly, the Polynesians, who lived in harmony with the ocean, observed how changes in currents and tides often preceded tsunamis. These weren't random guesses, they were patterns honed through generations of careful observation. What's fascinating is how these cultures integrated these natural signs into their daily lives. For the Romans, the sudden absence of birdsong wasn't just a curiosity, it was a warning to evacuate or take shelter. The Polynesians, whose survival depended on the sea, used their knowledge of ocean behavior to guide their navigation and settlement decisions. These practices weren't just about survival, they were about building a deep, almost symbiotic relationship with nature. But it wasn't just animals and the elements that served as predictors. Ancient peoples also looked to the skies, interpreting cloud formations, wind patterns, and even the color of the horizon as signs of impending change. In many ways, they were the first meteorologists, using the natural world as their guidebook. And while their methods might seem primitive by today's standards, their ability to read the environment with such precision is a testament to their ingenuity and resourcefulness. As we explore this connection between ancient cultures and natural phenomena, it's impossible not to wonder how much of this wisdom has been lost over time. Could we, with all our advanced technology, learn something from their ability to listen to the earth? This leads us to another fascinating aspect of ancient disaster prediction, the role of sacred sites. These locations, often built with meticulous precision and aligned with celestial or geological features, played a crucial role in how societies understood and prepared for natural events. The link between these sites and disaster prediction is a story of both science and spirituality, one that reveals just how deeply intertwined ancient cultures were with the forces of nature. As we delve deeper into the fascinating ways ancient cultures anticipated natural disasters, one of the most intriguing connections lies in their sacred sites. These weren't just places of worship, they were hubs of observation, carefully chosen and designed to align with the rhythms of the natural world. Take the Mayans, for instance. Their towering temples weren't merely architectural marvels, they were meticulously aligned with celestial events like solstices and equinoxes. The Mayans believed these cosmic patterns held the key to understanding the timing of disasters, from droughts to floods. By tracking the movements of the sun, moon, and stars, they could predict seasonal changes and prepare for potential calamities. The Greeks took a similar approach, but with a focus on the earth itself. They built oracles in places like Delphi, known for their seismic activity. These sites were believed to be channels of divine communication, where the gods warned of impending disasters through tremors or prophetic visions. What's remarkable is how these cultures combined spirituality with practicality. Sacred sites weren't just spiritual retreats, they doubled as early warning systems where priests and scholars monitored natural signs to protect their communities. This blending of the sacred and the scientific reveals a profound understanding of the interconnectedness of nature. Ancient cultures didn't see disasters as random events, they saw them as part of a larger cosmic order, one they could interpret through careful observation. And speaking of observation, their methods didn't stop at sacred sites. They also developed intricate systems of timekeeping to track patterns over long periods. Which brings us to one of their most sophisticated tools, the calendar, a tool that not only marked the passage of time, but also served as a blueprint for predicting the future. Ancient cultures didn't just see calendars as ways to mark the passage of time. They saw them as lifelines. By meticulously tracking the movements of the stars, the moon, and the seasons, civilizations like the Aztecs and the Chinese were able to anticipate the rhythms of nature, including the terrifying power of natural disasters. Take the Aztecs, for example. Their calendar wasn't just a grid of days, it was a sophisticated system that recorded patterns of volcanic eruptions over centuries. By studying these patterns, they could predict when the next eruption might occur, giving their communities time to prepare or evacuate. The Chinese, on the other hand, turned their attention to the moon. They noticed that certain lunar cycles often coincided with devastating floods, particularly along the Yellow River. By aligning their agricultural and social activities with these lunar patterns, they could mitigate the impact of floods, ensuring their crops and communities survived. These calendars weren't just tools, they were survival blueprints built on generations of observation and wisdom. What's truly remarkable is how these ancient systems reflect a deep connection between humans and the natural world. They didn't have satellites or seismographs, but they had something equally powerful: patience, observation, and an unshakable belief in the cyclical nature of the universe. By understanding these patterns, they turned what could have been random acts of destruction into predictable events they could prepare for. And speaking of preparation, that brings us to the next piece of the puzzle: rituals. Beyond calendars, ancient cultures developed elaborate ceremonies and practices to not only predict disasters, but also to spiritually and practically prepare for them. These rituals were more than just symbolic, they were acts of resilience woven into the fabric of daily life. But more on that in a moment. Rituals weren't just symbolic acts, they were deeply practical tools for survival. Across the globe, ancient communities understood that disaster preparedness wasn't just about physical readiness. It was about creating a shared mindset of responsibility and vigilance. Take the Japanese, for instance. Every year, coastal villages held ceremonies to honor the sea gods, offering prayers and sacrifices to seek protection from devastating tsunamis. These rituals weren't just about appeasing the divine, they were a way to remind the community of the ever-present danger of the ocean and to reinforce collective action in the face of potential disaster. Similarly, in India, rain dances weren't merely performances, they were a call to action. In regions prone to drought, entire villages would come together to perform these dances, invoking the gods for rain while also preparing their fields and water storage systems for whatever the seasons might bring. These rituals strengthened social bonds, ensuring that everyone in the community knew their role and responsibility when disaster struck. It was a way of saying, "We're in this together," long before the storm clouds formed or the earth began to tremble. But rituals did more than just build unity, they also served as a form of early warning system. By embedding disaster preparedness into cultural practices, ancient societies ensured that knowledge about potential threats was passed down through generations. Stories, songs, and ceremonies became living archives of survival wisdom, keeping communities alert and prepared for the unexpected. Now, let's shift our focus to another fascinating aspect of ancient disaster prediction: divination. From reading animal behavior to interpreting celestial signs, ancient cultures developed intricate methods to foresee and prepare for natural disasters. These practices, often steeped in mystery, reveal just how closely our ancestors observed the world around them and how they sought to harness that knowledge for survival. But what if these ancient practices weren't just mystical rituals? What if they were born out of centuries of observation and survival instincts? Take the Etruscans, for example. This ancient civilization, which thrived in what is now modern-day Italy, believed that the gods communicated through the natural world. They practiced a form of divination called haruspicy, where priests examined the entrails of sacrificed animals for signs of impending disasters such as earthquakes. To us, it might seem like superstition, but consider this: animal behavior often changes before seismic activity. Could the Etruscans have been picking up on subtle cues from nature, interpreting them through the lens of their beliefs? It's a fascinating intersection of spirituality and what we might now call early science. Then there were the Norse, who turned to runes, mystical symbols carved into wood or stone, to foresee looming catastrophes like floods. These symbols weren't just random markings, they were part of a complex system of communication with the divine. When a rune reading suggested danger, entire communities would prepare, reinforcing their homes or moving to higher ground. These actions weren't just acts of faith, they were practical responses to very real threats. What's striking about these practices is how they reveal a universal truth. Ancient cultures were deeply attuned to their environments, and their methods of prediction, though wrapped in ritual, often had a practical core. They observed patterns, made connections, and used whatever tools they had, whether animal entrails or runes, to protect their people. And while we might not rely on divination today, the underlying principle remains the same. Understanding the world around us is key to survival. Now, let's shift our focus from the mystical to the tangible. How did ancient societies use their environments and ingenuity to build structures that could withstand the forces of nature? The answer lies in their remarkable architectural innovations, which we'll explore next. Ancient architects weren't just building for beauty, they were engineering for survival. Take the Inca civilization, for instance. High in the Andes, where earthquakes are a constant threat, they constructed their buildings with interlocking stones. These stones fit together like a puzzle, allowing the walls to sway and shift during tremors without collapsing. It's a design so effective that many of these structures still stand today, centuries later, defying the forces of nature. Meanwhile, over in Mesopotamia, architects faced a different challenge: powerful winds sweeping across the flat plains. Their solution: ziggurats, massive step temples with sloping sides. These angled walls not only gave the structures a striking appearance, but also helped them withstand the relentless gusts that could topple less sturdy buildings. What's remarkable is how these ancient builders didn't just react to disasters, they anticipated them. They observed their environments, learned from them, and then crafted solutions that were both practical and ingenious. These weren't just feats of architecture, they were acts of resilience, a testament to humanity's ability to adapt and thrive in the face of nature's unpredictability. And speaking of adaptation, let's turn our attention to another critical aspect of ancient disaster prevention: water management. From flood control to irrigation, civilizations around the world developed innovative systems to harness and redirect water, ensuring their survival in some of the most challenging environments on Earth. Water was a force that ancient civilizations both revered and feared. It brought life to their crops but could also unleash destruction through floods and droughts. Take the Indus Valley civilization, for example. They thrived in what is now modern-day Pakistan and northwest India, and their cities were marvels of urban planning. But what's truly fascinating is how they tackled the challenge of water management. They built intricate drainage systems, complete with covered sewers and carefully designed channels to prevent flooding during the monsoon season. These systems weren't just functional, they were a testament to their understanding of the environment and their ability to adapt to it. Then there's ancient Egypt, where the Nile River was the lifeblood of the civilization. Every year, the Nile would flood, depositing rich silt that made the land fertile. But these floods could also be unpredictable and devastating. To harness the river's power, the Egyptians developed sophisticated irrigation networks. Canals, basins, and dikes were constructed to control the water flow, ensuring that crops could thrive even in dry seasons. This mastery of water management didn't just sustain their population, it allowed their society to flourish, paving the way for monumental achievements in art, architecture, and science. What's striking is how these ancient systems weren't just about survival, they were about foresight. Both the Indus Valley and Egyptian cultures recognized the dual nature of water, its potential to nourish and to destroy, and they planned accordingly. Their innovations weren't just reactive, they were proactive, designed to anticipate and mitigate the risks posed by natural disasters. But water wasn't the only element that ancient cultures sought to understand and control. Fire, too, played a significant role in their lives, not just as a tool for warmth and cooking, but as a powerful indicator of environmental changes. The way ancient societies interpreted fire, whether through volcanic activity or wildfires, offers another fascinating glimpse into how they predicted and responded to natural disasters. Throughout history, fire has held a dual role, both as a destructive force and as a powerful symbol of warning. Ancient cultures often interpreted unusual or uncontrolled fires as omens of impending disaster. Take the Greeks, for instance. They believed volcanic eruptions were the work of Hephaestus, the god of fire and blacksmithing. To them, the fiery explosions and rivers of molten rock weren't just natural phenomena. They were divine messages, a sign that the gods were stirring. This belief wasn't just a story, it shaped how they approached these events, often leading to rituals and offerings aimed at appeasing the gods and averting catastrophe. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, the Hawaiians took a more observational approach. They closely monitored the behavior of their volcanoes, paying attention to the smoke and steam rising from the craters. Over time, they learned to recognize subtle changes in these emissions, using them as early warning signs of an impending eruption. This knowledge wasn't just academic, it was woven into their daily lives, influencing where they built their settlements and how they prepared for potential disasters. It's fascinating to think about how these ancient societies turned something as terrifying as volcanic activity into a tool for survival. But fire wasn't the only natural phenomenon they studied. Wind patterns also played a crucial role in how ancient cultures predicted disasters. In many societies, wind wasn't just seen as a force of nature, it was a messenger carrying clues about what was to come. By observing shifts in wind direction, speed, and even the sounds it made, people could often anticipate storms, droughts, or even seismic events. This knowledge wasn't just passed down through stories, it became an integral part of their cultural identity, shaping everything from agricultural practices to ceremonial traditions. The way these cultures interpreted wind patterns shows just how deeply connected they were to their environment. They didn't have satellites or weather apps, but they didn't need them. Instead, they relied on centuries of accumulated wisdom, paying close attention to the world around them and learning to read its signs. It's a reminder that sometimes the most advanced technology we have is the ability to observe, adapt, and respect the natural world. Have you ever wondered how ancient civilizations could predict the weather without modern technology? One of their most fascinating tools was the wind itself. Ancient cultures deeply understood that wind patterns held vital clues about incoming storms and weather changes. Take the Polynesians, for instance. These master navigators of the Pacific didn't just use the stars to guide their voyages, they also paid close attention to the winds. By observing subtle shifts in wind direction and intensity, they could sense when a cyclone was approaching, allowing them to steer their canoes to safety. Their ability to read the wind wasn't just practical, it was a survival skill honed over generations. The Vikings, too, were masters of interpreting the winds. For these seafaring warriors, the ocean was both a highway and a hazard. They knew that certain wind patterns signaled dangerous conditions like sudden storms or rough seas. By watching the way the wind moved across the water, they could decide whether it was safe to sail or if they needed to wait for calmer weather. This knowledge wasn't just about convenience, it was a matter of life and death. What's truly remarkable is how these ancient practices reveal a profound connection to the natural world. Unlike today, where we rely on satellites and weather apps, these cultures had to rely on their senses and observations. They understood that nature itself was a living, breathing system, and by listening to its signals, they could anticipate its changes. This intimate relationship with the environment wasn't just practical, it was almost spiritual, a reminder that humans are deeply intertwined with the world around them. Now, while wind patterns were a crucial tool for predicting disasters, ancient cultures didn't stop there. They also turned their attention to the plant life around them. From the way leaves curled to the timing of blooms, plants offered another layer of insight into the natural world's rhythms. Stay tuned as we explore how ancient societies used the behavior of plants to foresee disasters and adapt to the challenges of their environment. Have you ever stopped to think about how the natural world might be communicating with us? Long before modern science, ancient cultures understood that plants could be more than just a source of food or beauty. They could also act as silent sentinels, warning of impending natural disasters. Take, for example, the Chinese, who meticulously documented unusual behaviors in certain flowers before earthquakes. They noticed that some blooms would suddenly open or change color in ways that defied their usual seasonal patterns. This wasn't just a coincidence, it was a sign, a subtle but powerful indicator that the Earth was about to shift. Across the globe, Native American tribes observed similar phenomena, but with trees. They noticed that the growth patterns of certain species would change subtly before a drought. Rings in the wood might grow narrower, or the leaves might wilt prematurely, signaling a coming scarcity of water. These observations weren't just casual notes, they were critical pieces of knowledge that shaped agricultural practices and survival strategies. By paying attention to these natural cues, communities could prepare for hardships, adjusting planting schedules or conserving resources long before the disaster struck. What's fascinating is how these ancient cultures didn't just passively observe these signs, they actively integrated them into their way of life. For the Chinese, the blooming of certain flowers became part of their earthquake preparedness rituals, while Native Americans used tree patterns to guide their farming cycles. This deep connection to the environment wasn't just about survival, it was a profound respect for the interconnectedness of all living things. But the natural world's warnings didn't stop with plants. Ancient civilizations also turned their attention to sound, listening closely to the earth and sky for clues about what was to come. From the rumble of distant thunder to the eerie silence before a storm, these cultures learned to decipher the acoustic landscape, using it as another tool in their disaster prediction toolkit. And that's where we'll turn next, how the sounds of nature became a vital part of ancient forecasting. Imagine standing in a bustling Roman marketplace, the air thick with the hum of conversation and the clatter of goods. Suddenly, a low, ominous rumble rises from the earth, faint but unmistakable. For the Romans, this sound wasn't just an oddity, it was a warning. Ancient cultures across the globe often reported strange auditory phenomena before earthquakes, and they paid close attention. The Romans, for instance, documented a deep, rumbling noise that seemed to come from the ground itself, signaling the approach of tremors. Meanwhile, in Japan, people noticed an eerie silence in the natural world. Birds stopped chirping, and animals grew unusually still. These subtle changes in sound were taken as serious indicators of impending danger, often prompting entire communities to evacuate to safer ground. What's fascinating is how these observations weren't just random superstitions. They were based on careful, repeated experiences. The ancient Greeks, for example, spoke of a phenomenon they called bronze thunder, a metallic clanging sound that seemed to echo from the earth before a quake. In China, records from the Han Dynasty describe how villagers would listen for the sudden absence of frogs croaking near rivers, interpreting it as a sign of seismic activity. These cultures didn't have modern seismographs or scientific tools, but they developed a keen awareness of their environment, using sound as one of their earliest warning systems. But sound wasn't the only natural cue they relied on. Next, we'll explore how ancient civilizations turned their eyes to the skies, observing shifts in color and light that they believed signaled coming disasters. From the fiery hues of sunsets to the strange glow of the horizon, these visual warnings played a crucial role in their survival strategies. The sky, with its ever-shifting hues, served as a canvas for ancient cultures to decipher the secrets of nature. Across the globe, people looked upward, finding meaning in the colors of the atmosphere and using them as a guide to anticipate what lay ahead. In China, the saying, "Red sky at night, shepherd's delight," wasn't just a poetic phrase, it was a survival tool. A crimson sunset often signaled calm weather ahead, giving farmers and travelers a window of opportunity to prepare. But a red sky in the morning, that was a different story. It was seen as a warning of approaching storms, a cue to secure livestock and shelter before the winds arrived. Meanwhile, halfway around the world, the Aztecs paid close attention to a different kind of sky, one tinged with green. To them, this unusual color wasn't just a curiosity, it was a harbinger of volcanic activity. Living in a region surrounded by active volcanoes, the Aztecs learned to associate these greenish hues with the release of ash and gases, a sign that the Earth itself might soon erupt. These observations weren't just casual notes, they were woven into the fabric of their lives, shaping how they built their cities, stored their food, and even planned their rituals. But the sky wasn't the only source of clues. Ancient cultures also turned their attention to something far more subtle yet equally revealing: temperature changes. Shifts in warmth and cold weren't just seasonal markers, they were often the first whispers of larger, more dangerous events. From the Indus Valley to the Andes, people noticed that sudden drops or spikes in temperature could precede earthquakes, floods, or even volcanic eruptions. These observations, passed down through generations, became tools for survival, allowing communities to act before disaster struck. So, how did they interpret these changes, and what can we learn from their methods today? That's where our journey takes us next. Ancient cultures were incredibly attuned to the natural world, and one of the most fascinating ways they anticipated disasters was by observing temperature fluctuations. For centuries, people noticed that sudden shifts in weather patterns often signaled impending danger. The Greeks, for instance, recorded that hot, dry winds known as Atesian winds frequently preceded earthquakes. These winds, blowing from the north across the Aegean Sea, were not just a seasonal phenomenon, they became a vital clue for predicting seismic activity. Similarly, the Egyptians paid close attention to temperature changes along the Nile River. When unusually high temperatures caused the river's waters to rise rapidly, it often indicated an approaching flood. These floods, while sometimes devastating, were also essential for replenishing the soil with nutrients, making them a double-edged sword for agricultural communities. By tracking these temperature shifts, ancient societies could better prepare for the challenges ahead, whether it meant reinforcing structures or moving crops to safer ground. Their ability to read the environment with such precision highlights the deep connection they had with the natural world, a connection that modern science continues to explore. Now, let's turn our attention to another remarkable tool ancient cultures relied on: the moon. Lunar cycles played a significant role in their disaster prediction methods, offering yet another layer of insight into their sophisticated understanding of the world around them. The moon has always been a source of wonder, but for ancient civilizations, it was also a vital tool for survival. Across the globe, the connection between lunar cycles and natural disasters became a cornerstone of early warning systems. Take the Polynesians, for example. These master navigators of the Pacific didn't just rely on the stars to guide their voyages, they also studied the moon's phases to predict tsunamis. By observing how the tides behaved during different lunar stages, they could anticipate when the ocean might rise in dangerous ways, giving their communities precious time to seek higher ground. Meanwhile, over in ancient Mesopotamia, the Babylonians took a different approach. They meticulously tracked the moon's cycles, noting that seismic activity often seemed to spike around the time of a full moon. While we now understand that the moon's gravitational pull can subtly influence Earth's crust, the Babylonians saw these patterns as a sign from the gods, weaving them into their calendars and rituals. These lunar observations weren't just scientific, they were deeply cultural, shaping how entire societies prepared for the unpredictable forces of nature. But the moon wasn't the only natural indicator ancient cultures relied on. Animals, too, became an unexpected source of insight. From the way birds migrated to the behavior of livestock, ancient peoples noticed that nature often gave subtle warnings before disaster struck. And as we'll see next, these animal signals weren't just random coincidences, they were part of a larger, interconnected system that ancient cultures learned to read with astonishing accuracy. One of the most fascinating ways ancient cultures predicted natural disasters was by closely observing the behavior of animals, particularly their migration patterns. For centuries, people noticed that animals seemed to have an uncanny ability to sense changes in the environment long before humans could. Take the Native Americans, for instance. They observed that buffalo herds would suddenly move to higher ground, almost as if they knew a flood was coming. This wasn't just a random occurrence, it was a consistent pattern that became a reliable warning sign. Similarly, the ancient Greeks paid close attention to birds. They noticed that certain species would alter their migration routes or behave unusually before a major storm. These observations weren't dismissed as mere coincidences. They were taken seriously and integrated into the collective knowledge of the community. What's truly remarkable is how these cultures didn't just rely on a single observation, but built entire systems of knowledge around these patterns. They didn't have the advanced technology we have today, but they had something equally powerful, a deep connection to nature and a willingness to learn from it. By watching the movements of animals, they could anticipate disasters and take action to protect their communities. It's a testament to their ingenuity and their ability to work with the natural world rather than against it. As we move forward, we'll explore another critical method ancient cultures used to predict disasters: changes in the soil. Just as animals provided clues, the earth itself held secrets that, when understood, could save lives. Soil changes and ground instability were some of the most tangible signs ancient cultures relied on to predict natural disasters. They didn't have the advanced tools we do today, but they were remarkably observant of their environment. For example, in ancient China, people noticed that unusual cracks forming in the ground often signaled an impending earthquake. These weren't just random fissures, they were consistent enough to be recognized as a warning system. Similarly, the Maya civilization in Central America observed that certain types of soil became loose or unstable before volcanic eruptions. They understood that the earth itself was speaking to them, offering clues about what was to come. These observations weren't just academic exercises, they were critical to survival. Imagine living in a time when your entire community depended on your ability to read the land. A crack in the ground or a shift in soil stability could mean the difference between life and death. Ancient cultures didn't have seismographs or satellite imagery, but they had something equally powerful: generations of accumulated knowledge and a deep connection to the natural world. By carefully documenting these patterns and passing them down through stories, rituals, and oral traditions, they created a kind of early warning system. It's fascinating to think about how much they achieved with so little just by paying close attention to the world around them. And while their methods might seem rudimentary compared to modern science, they were effective enough to help communities prepare for and survive some of nature's most devastating events. This brings us to the end of our exploration into how ancient cultures predicted natural disasters. From observing animal behavior to tracking celestial patterns and even reading the subtle changes in the earth itself, these early societies developed ingenious ways to anticipate danger. Their legacy reminds us that even without modern technology, human ingenuity and a deep respect for nature can go a long way. From the stars to the soil, ancient cultures demonstrated an extraordinary ability to read the signs of the natural world. They didn't have satellites or seismographs, but they had something just as powerful, a deep connection to their environment. By observing the patterns in the heavens, the behavior of animals, and even subtle shifts in the earth, they were able to anticipate disasters with remarkable accuracy. These methods, though ancient, were far from primitive. They were born of necessity, creativity, and an intimate understanding of the world around them. What's truly fascinating is how much of their wisdom still resonates today. While we have advanced technology at our fingertips, there's something timeless about their approach. They remind us that disaster preparedness isn't just about having the right tools. It's about paying attention, staying connected, and learning from the world itself. By revisiting their methods, we can uncover new ways to build resilience in our own lives and communities. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the mysteries of the past. If you found this exploration as enlightening as we did, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us continue uncovering the stories that shape our world. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and stay curious about the incredible wisdom that history has to offer.